So welcome everybody. It's great to see you here on a Thursday night. I have the privilege of introducing our panel, and as I was learning more about the Union of Southern Service Workers, I came across this description from Politico. The South has what a dozen organizers and experts characterized as a regional culture that has long proven resistant to collective bargaining. Because of this history, workers often lack deep union ties. Corporations, for their part, often relocate to the South to avoid organizing campaigns. Many political leaders are openly hostile to unions. The region is a stronghold for so-called right-to-work laws, which make it harder for unions to take root since employers can't be required to pay dues, as well as laws making it more difficult or illegal for public sector workers to bargain. And then, of course, there's the legacy of racism, long relied on by employers to divide workers and make organizing even harder. That legacy also includes the intentional exclusion of agricultural and domestic workers from the federal law intended to guarantee the right to organize, an exclusion that amounted to economic disenfranchisement of millions of Black and Latino workers. In 2022, union membership rates in every state in the South fell below the national average. Into this hostile environment comes the innovative, strategic, and hopeful work of the Union of Southern Service Workers. The USSW is building a union despite the fact that the rules are rigged against Southern workers. Their demands include dignity and equal treatment, health and safety, fair and consistent scheduling, fair pay, and the right to organize. Their strategies, including the sectoral approach that is inherent in their membership of workers who come from across multiple employers and markets, and a community-based approach, are responsive to the challenging conditions in which their struggle takes place, and we can all learn from their bold example. The importance of the local to the USSW, including the prospect for state and local legal interventions, makes this a fitting panel on the eve of our two-day convening on state and local approaches to building worker power, which I hope many of you will attend. And so it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to introduce our guests this evening, Representative Angie Nixon and Dorothy Singletary. So Representative Nixon is a native of Jacksonville and a graduate of Stanton College Prep and the University of Florida. She grew up in Jacksonville, and since November of 2020, she has served as a representative in the Florida House. Angie has a 10-year career as a community organizer. She has helped win access to healthy food options in food deserts. She co-founded and operated Northside and Love, a summer arts and vendors market. She's the founder of Kintrepreneur Fest, Kintrepreneur Fest, an annual event that showcases kid entrepreneurs. And she's currently the organizer and co-founder of the Melanin Market, now in its fourth year providing small business owners with resources to grow their businesses and providing healthy food options in yet another food desert. Angie previously served as the North Florida Regional Organizer for North Florida Majority. She also was the State Field Director for SEIU, the Director for the Florida Public Service Union's Higher Education Campaign, Political Director for the Florida Democratic Party, and is currently Executive Director for a coalition of statewide progressive organizations in Florida. Dorothy Singletary is the Assistant General Counsel of SEIU. She advocates for fast food, retail, and home care workers with SEIU's Fight for 15 campaign and the Union of Southern Service Workers. Before joining SEIU, Dorothy worked as Assistant General Counsel at Climate Jobs National Resource Center, and prior to that, she served as an SEIU legal fellow, a job maybe some of you in this room will avoid. Dorothy got her BA in Political Science from the University of Maryland College Park and her JD from the University of Maryland. So join me in welcoming. I will turn it over to someone who needs no introduction in this room, Professor Sharon Block.
And thank you so much for being here. This is exciting and a hopeful conversation, I think, despite the challenges that the Politico article pointed out. I do just want to start though by saying, I wish that reporters could get it right, that no union, no matter where you are, can compel workers to pay union dues. The only thing that any union can compel workers to pay is the cost of the services that the union provides to them in non-rent to work states. So it'd just be nice if every once in a while the reporter got that right. But anyway, I digress. So Representative Nixon, let's start by painting the picture of why it's so hard to organize in the South. I mean, we got it from a Politico reporter. I'd love to hear from your experience as both an organizer and now as a representative in the state legislature. Why is a special focus on organizing in the South needed? And what do you see as the unique challenges in the region?
So first of all, thank you all for having me. I would like us to briefly take a moment of silence based on everything that's happening in the world today, especially over in Israel, Palestine, as well as what's happening in our country. There's a lot of gun violence that has been happening. All right, so again, an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. I'm State Representative Angie Nixon. Y'all don't get a lot of this drawl. And I have mommy brain. I have a 3-year-old toddler, so I do have some notes. But the South, right? It's important to note that government can either support or destroy the working class in the state. And in Florida, the power of the state has almost exclusively been used to crush workers. We have a trifecta down there, meaning one party control of the governor's mansion, the House, and the Senate. And usually when you have that, you can do a lot of things. That's a lot of power, right? It can be used for good and in support of workers and protecting and expanding democracy like they do in Minnesota, or it could be the exact opposite, like what they're doing in the South, which is crushing workers as well as, just it's bad. Crushing workers and just making us feel bad down there. And so there's a lot of things that are happening down there. They are pushing this anti-woke agenda, which is simply a thinly veiled way of saying anti-Black. And what it is doing is it's causing them to attack corporations that want to stand up for their workers' civil rights, as well as those who are Black and brown and LGBTQ, as well as women, right? At its core, this fight is frankly just about how corporations should behave in our society, period. Should they focus on short-term risky value extraction or long-term sustainable value creation? They that make the rules win. They that control the frame, the message also win. And that's what we see right now in the South, especially Florida. We are a state, we are Southern states that are deeply rooted in systemic racism, systemic classism, paternalistic systems since the founding of our country, which was founded on stolen land, right? And so it's important to note that. And let's be clear, this is all about money, power, and control. Our country is becoming very diverse. Our country is darkening. Women are stepping into leadership, but you got these rich white dudes who have been in power for so long, and they are fearful of losing that money, power, and control, and even more so fearful that these rising majorities are going to come into power and do to them what they've been doing to us for hundreds of years, right? And while there are some gains that happen in the South, a lot of it is undermined through preemption, state preemption, because that's what you can do. You can preempt local governments when you have trifectas. Remember, you can either do good things like expand democracy, or you can erode it, right? And in the South, they are deeply eroding democracy. And also we're seeing they are gerrymandering, especially in my state, where the governor, who's also running for president, he really ain't governing anything, where he basically did something unconstitutional. He drew maps. That's not his job. That's the state legislature's job. They drew maps that removed Black congressional districts. I sat on the floor, led a peaceful protest along with Representative McCurdy to protest that, but it did not matter. He did it anyway, because again, they had that GOP trifecta, right? Why is it important to organize in the South? Because they use us as a testing ground, frankly. As he stated earlier, you know, in the South, we were the first to like really have these right to work states, to bust up these unions. We also have a lot of marginalized communities, a lot of migrant workers. They're testing us out right now, especially around loosening of child labor laws, right? Especially within the auto worker industry. But they won't try that in Detroit. Not first. They're trying it in the South though, because again, you know, they like to erode democracy down there. And then there's also these anti-ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance efforts, which are a threat to retirement security. It is basically a project that exposes retirement safety, it exposes retirement security, it exposes it to financial risk based on destructive worker practices, based on overcompensation of the executives, based on poor environmental practices. And also, if you really do your research, you'll see that you'll lose money if you pull it out of these systems, because like they're profitable. People want to make sure their investments go towards good things. And so it's also important because it's a health and safety, public safety issue. Right now, abortion in the South, particularly in Florida, we're the only place you can get an abortion before 15 weeks. That is not forever, because that can change if the Florida Supreme Court overturns our right to privacy, then it'll be 6 weeks. What happens when that happens? There's going to be a mass exodus of healthcare workers. There already is, but an even more mass exodus of healthcare workers in our state. And that means that there's going to be massive wait times to go see a doctor for women. That means poor maternal outcomes, higher infant mortality rates, and the list goes on and on and on. And then why really should you care about investing and organizing in Florida? Because we live here. People actually live in Florida. I know folks may not think it's bad. It is bad, but we don't need to allow fascism to continually spread across our country, because it is happening, right? And so send help. And so some of the unique challenges are basically what I laid out, right? We have a conservative trifecta, actually hell, a quad, because the courts are also conservative and doing some very horrible things that are continually eroding democracy. Long-standing the longstanding lack of national investment has caused people to think that Florida is not winnable. I would say that ain't true all the time, if we get an investment. And so those are just, some of the things. The most money that was put into Florida for like a real organizing drive was in the 40s. The last time that happened was in the 40s. The 40s. We almost 100 years today. So it's like, hey, it's people here, send help. But again, if we want a nation that is not perpetually on the cusp of chaos, we have to organize in the South.
Dorothy, I'm gonna now turn to the Union of Southern Service Workers, and I love the mission statement says that the union is organizing to win structural changes. So that says to me that this isn't traditional union organizing. Your folks aren't out there collecting union authorization cards to present to an employer to make a demand for like worksite collective bargaining. So what are the structural changes that USSW wants to win, and what are the strategies that you're using to achieve those changes?
Yeah, so USSW, we are committed to ensuring that there are structural changes in our members' workplaces. So again, we are member-led. Our workers are the ones who come up with the demands. And I think Ben went through them a bit, where we're looking for, fair and equal pay. We want dignity and treatment at work. We want fair and consistent hours. We're asking for safety on the job, as well as we're asking for the ability to actually exercise our right to organize, as well as demanding a seat at the table. As you mentioned, we don't take a traditional approach to actually organizing, right? Like, we're not doing shop by shop. We're not doing, we're trying to become the exclusive bargaining representative or trying to negotiate a contract, right? And part of the reason is that a lot of our workers, they're low-wage service sector workers. So our workers are fast food, they are nursing home workers, they are working in warehouses, they're in retail. And so a big feature of that is that there's really high turnover rates, and there's also a lot of unpredictable scheduling. And so that makes it really hard to kind of do that traditional type of organizing. So for us, we've been really focusing on taking different approaches. So one, it looks at, we take a sectoral approach to organizing our workers across the South. And so again, I think what makes it, the beauty of that is, again, the fact that there's such high turnover rates, we have to figure out a way to handle that. So if you are a member of USSW, say at a McDonald's, right? Like, that's where we met you, that's how you became involved with us. Say if you decide that you want to move to, say, like working at a Dollar General, or you want to work at a warehouse, you're always going to stay a member of USSW, right? You don't have to go through this kind of idea of like you move to a different location and you kind of have to start all over again, right? Like, you always continue to keep to reap the benefits of collective worker power, collective worker action, no matter where you go at. In addition to taking that sectoral approach to organizing, we put a lot of emphasis on worker-led direct action. So we're really focusing on, bringing the demands straight to management. And we do this in a number of ways. This includes going on strikes. We do demand letter petitions. We do speak outs outside of stores. And I think it seems very simple, right? Like, how would that move people? But again, I think this is where the sectoral approach to organizing workers comes into play, right? For example, over the summer, we had 2 Burger King workers at one store location. They went on strike. And they were striking because the AC at their store ended up breaking, and they weren't getting any water breaks, they weren't getting any rest breaks. The workers were complaining about basically suffering from like heat stroke and heat illness. And so, and again, we only had 2 workers that were part of USSW go on strike. And with that, we ended up doing a speak out outside of the Burger King location. And so again, 2 workers, right, may not really move the employer. But we also brought out more USSW members. And so people from the area, we brought out Dollar General workers, we brought out warehouse workers and other fast food and retail workers. And there, they were outside of that Burger King talking about the issues that they were dealing with as well. Because again, unfortunately in the South, it's really common that the AC just does not work. They do not care about the workers working in the heat. And so they were all out there telling their stories. And then we end up getting like some local news outlet picked it up, like just randomly. And then from there, like, I guess the owner of the Burger King did not like the heat that it was getting. And so within a day or so, he ended up closing down the store and fixing the AC. But not only did he fix the AC at that store, he also fixed the AC at his other locations that he owned in the nearby area as well. Because I think he was getting a little nervous with us. But even more incredible too is the fact that like, we were actually planning to file like an OSHA complaint about these issues, but we didn't have a chance to do it before the speak out and the strike happened. But then we had like our friendly contacts from OSHA contacting us before, and they were like, hey, we saw this in the news, like this seems like a big deal, like what can we do, like how can we help you guys? And so again, that kind of goes to show that like, you know, it's really hard, right? If you're just only having 1 or 2 workers at one location kind of taking these kind of direct actions, but when you have a bunch of people coming in and everyone's saying the same thing, it's really echoing those issues out to the public. And also a really big thing for us is bringing out the community. And I think that really, you know, puts the pressure on these managers to say, hey, or the owners of these stores and say, hey, like, I got to do something, right? Like I'm catching a lot of heat. And like I said, they saw the public coming from the media, but like I said, we also had people from OSHA also about to come for them too. So I think that that was so impressive. And also for USSW, we're really focused not only on putting kind of that, holding our employers accountable. There's also a huge focus on also holding the state governments and entities that are responsible for workers' health, their safety, things such as that, holding them accountable as well. And so earlier this year, USSW had filed a Title VI civil rights complaint against South Carolina OSHA with the Department of Labor. And what we alleged in it was that basically South Carolina OSHA was failing to do programmatic inspections at in industries that were disproportionately Black. And those industries were generally where our workers are at, like warehouses, retail, fast food workers. And really when we did the research on it, again, like from 2018 to 2022, they had only performed like a programmatic inspection in those industries twice between those years, right? And collectively in those industries. And that's concerning, especially when you look at the fact that they tend to do these inspections in predominantly white male industries, such as the construction industry, the trade specialty industries. But when we were looking at the OSHA data, we were seeing, well, you know, the industries where our workers are at, they're almost dangerous, just as dangerous or even more dangerous than what's happening in those industries as well. And I mean, the stories I could tell you about the amount of violence and like how dangerous these places are, like, again, I'm still pretty new to this campaign, but it was just something I had never seen before, honestly. So again, we're really trying to think of like, what are the strategies to do to raise awareness, but also again, to hold our state governments and entities accountable as well to these workers. So that's just a few of the strategies that we've employed.
That's awesome. I love that. Filing a complaint against the state, the state plan, having worked on OSHA issues for a long time, and knowing what a uneven level of protection the state plans provide.
Yeah.
All right, so Angie, we just met, but I can tell, I mean, I know you were an organizer from your background, and I can tell you were somebody who, you don't seem like somebody who's just gonna sort of take this kind of, you know, these abusive policies that you were describing. So what kind of work, like what are the conversations you have with your colleagues who in the legislature who also care about worker rights? Like what do you do in that sort of that affirmative organizing among your colleagues or with your communities, even knowing like what those strong headwinds are to actually win?
Right, so I'm gonna be real. Because the state is the way it is, a lot of folks are fearful to speak out or to push bills that are actually transformative. And sometimes members within my caucus sell out, so to speak, or aren't as forceful or progressive with what they really want to see happen. They just like, they settle for scraps on top of scraps of scraps of scraps, let's be clear. But there are some of us, right, that are there and that we actually work towards pushing transformative policies and that type of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that we have to do behind the scenes and get amendments onto bills to make bills less bad and things like that. But I know we were recently able, because I don't just look at it from a workers in the workplace perspective. Like we think of the workers holistically. And so I was also an organizer with SEIU, the field director, and we established a community union to really like address the holistic needs of the worker. And so we recently passed a bill last session that expanded kid care, which was like Medicaid for children, because there was this financial cliff, because we were able, since a lot of our policies, a lot of the policies that many legislators tried to push, they don't even get agendaed, but we do have the power of the ballot. And so we recently won in a time where Ron DeSantis became governor in 2018. We were able to, on the ballot, win $50 minimum wage, although it was incremental, right? So it started out as 10, 11, it's now 12, and then it'll go to 15, which still ain't enough, by the way. But it was something that we were able to do collectively with, the union and community and things like that, right? We were also able that same year, it's crazy, right? We elected a really, really uber conservative guy, but we were won some progressive ballot initiatives. We also were able to win Amendment 4, which is rights restoration for returning citizens or formerly incarcerated individuals, or a very horrible term, ex-felons, that I don't like to use, right? And so that re-enfranchised like 1.4 million voters. However, that guy came in, did some maneuvering and undermining, and made it so that now they had to, it's not automatic, now they have to pay fines and fees, which is like just wrong, right? Then he created this election police thing, it's wild. But yeah, so that's what we do in the state. Like when we have to deal with this GOP trifecta or quad, right? We take it to the ballot and we push things that the people want. And so what we're taking to the ballot right now is abortion access, the right for the government to actually like stop trying to undermine abortion access. However, like it's been tough. I'm just gonna be honest with you. The majority of the money, I wanna say 70% of the money that we've needed, 70% of the money that's come in, that has been raised, has been in Florida. And when I spoke earlier, there has been a lack of long-term investment, national investment in the state, right? Like we are at risk of not making the ballot if we don't get $3 million in by the end of the year. And it's crazy because like we're doing something that has never been done before in the state like this fast. Like we've collected hundreds of thousands of petitions, like yes, some paid, but a lot of those like volunteer in a number of, I wanna say like less than 6 months. That's unheard of, right? We're also gonna be seeking to expand Medicaid, but we have to do it on the ballot, right? And so those are some of the things that we're working on, as well as like when there is some investment, like we win, right? So I am the executive director of a statewide alignment group coalition of progressive organizations called Florida for All. We recently won last year. We were able to get rent stabilization on the ballot, again, having to take things to the ballot in Orlando, in Orange County, and we won it. Like we were gonna rent, we we were gonna stabilize rents, basically put a rent cap for a year to, you know, do the research and things like that, and then come back and see what we should really ingrain into policy, right? But of course, you know, those lobby groups, those apartment associations and things like that, they took it to court, and then it was held up in the courts, and then the state came and preempted it, right? And so, again, like, it's so wild, because also they tried to pass last year. Right now, it is now 60%. In order, like, if you vote, if you have a ballot initiative and you want to get it passed, it has to be 60% in the affirmative. There's this guy that decided to try to make it 66% because we were winning too much, right? So it's like, welcome to Florida. But like, we also win on local campaigns, especially when there's investment, we win. Again, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. We just won the mayor's race, the first woman mayor of Jacksonville, who's a progressive, who through our local theory of change tables that we have all across the state, we have one in Jacksonville, that we invest and put money in, and we're organizing all these small grassroots organizations to do work year round, right? Like, and we were able to hold that for the past 3 years, and we were able to elect a progressive woman mayor in a time where we have a fascist governor who is using money to play political games and traffic migrants across the country, right? So it's like, when people invest in our state, like, we win. When we work together, when these groups are able to work together, we win. And so that's a little bit of the organizing that we're doing with electeds and with community and unions and things like that.
Great, thank you for that. Dorothy, so I'm gonna ask you how you answer a question I feel like I get a lot lately, which is, lots of us in this room, I would imagine, have been watching Hot Labor Summer, which has extended well into the fall. It actually feels like fall outside. And so I often find people ask, like, well, isn't labor law working? Like, well, look what the auto workers have won, look what the writers have won. But the workers that you're organizing, you know, we were just talking about, you are not using traditional labor law to get wins for them. So how do you explain that, and to workers, and then also to sort of the public, about why labor law seems to be working for some workers, but USSW needs to take a different approach?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And honestly, that's something I had asked myself before joining the campaign, but it does become readily apparent. And so right now, US labor law is really focused on kind of, again, this traditional pathway of organizing, right? Like, you do shop by shop, you do facility by facility. Again, you try to get the workers into the union by running an election or getting volunteer recognition, and then you have to, go in and try to negotiate a contract. That all takes a lot of time. Our workers do not have that time. Like I said before, in our industries that we're working in, there's extremely high turnover. And the turnover rates in our industries, they well outpace the ability to actually do any type of traditional organizing in them. In addition to that, again, also part of that also is the fact that our workers don't know their coworkers very well, right? Like, they can't, like, them trying to get together a union, like, it's really difficult because, again, because of the turnover rates, most people, their coworkers might be there for maybe a month or so. Like, I know most of the time when I've met workers since I've started this campaign, if they stay at their job more than 5 months, like, that's a long time. Like, honestly, like, people really do not stay at these jobs really long. And again, part of that is the fact that these jobs are seen as kind of transitory, right? Like, people don't realize, like, the idea of working at like fast food and like Dollar General, things like that, people come to mind of like teenagers doing that, and it's like a summer job, but these are people's jobs, right? But it really is such high turnover rates. And again, also with the unpredictable scheduling, our worker schedules, they change constantly, right? Like literally week to week, day to day. And again, that makes it really difficult for them to, again, to get to know their coworkers, to actually start doing a traditional type of like, union organizing and like, doing that type of stuff. And so, again, it just doesn't fit well in the framework for our workers. And another big thing too is also to note that, again, the issues in our workers' workplaces, it usually bleeds out into so many other different areas of their lives, right? Like, it's so like, you don't realize like how important your job is, right? Until you really think about the fact that like, these workers are living paycheck to paycheck. They are not getting paid very well. These workers have unstable housing conditions. Like, the amount of workers that we have that literally are living in homestays, like those short-term hotels. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of workers that have health issues. They don't have access to affordable health care. And so these are just a few of the issues that we're dealing with. And so for us, again, kind of taking that traditional pathway of organizing and trying to get that contract, it just takes too long. Like, our workers need action now. Like, they need to bring those issues to their management right now, because their issues are that pressing. And I think also too, this is not just unique only to our workers, but I think you can still see some of those issues that I mentioned, even in other ways that workers are organizing. I think about like Amazon and Starbucks, right? Like, they were able to get elections there and win, but again, now they're stalling out on the contracts, right? And like, the hope is from these employers is like, stall. People are gonna leave, right? Like, and then they're gonna get, their coworkers are going to be like, well, why did we even do this? Things like that. And so again, for us, I think the biggest issue is just the time. Like, it just takes too much time to wait in order to get the workers the remedies that they need right now. And even still too, to that point too, not only the NLRA, but also the NLRB as a process of itself. I mean, I know I've never seen this before, but down south, like, it can take literally over a year after we file an unfair labor practice charge to even get a region determination of merit. Like, it takes forever. Like, our workers will get fired from something, and then like literally like it takes a year. And again, they're looking at us like, okay, so you said we could go through the EOP process, right? Like, you said we're going to get something, and then it's like we're looking at them like, yeah, like, this is the process that they have out for us, and it takes forever. And so again, I think the reason why we again kind of move towards again the idea of direct action, and again kind of taking these issues to management. So because we know that the legal process, it just doesn't fit well for our workers. It's failing our workers, honestly. And even thinking about the remedies that our workers get, they're not really great. Even if you do end up getting, a finding that there was a UOP. So for us, I think that's a big reason why we kind of stayed away and kind of, thrown away the rule book and did something different.
Great, well, I'm gonna open it up now to all of you.
Hey, thanks both of y'all for coming. I'm hoping y'all can speak to this idea that there's something different about the South, like culturally, that prevents successful labor organizing. I'm from Atlanta, and while it's true that no one that I knew growing up was in a union, I feel like the tradition of civil rights organizing and the sense of community in the South makes it like a natural place for organizing. So from your experience organizing with SEIU and USSW, like, what is folks' response to labor organizing? Are they skeptical? Are they hostile? Or where does this idea come from?
Yeah, I will say this, and this is really shocking to me because I'm not from the South. For one, I mean, I think, well, this idea obviously comes from like the fact that it's hard to organize from the South. And I mean, it's really based, right, in historical context, right? Like, if you think back to like the 1930s and 1940s, right? Like, when the nation was passing these like, the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, like racist Southern congressmen worked to exclude agricultural workers and domestic workers from those protections, right? And those were workers that were predominantly Black. And this still happens today, right? Like, they're still using strategies in order to make sure that, particularly, especially workers of color, continue to have low wages, continue passing anti-union laws, weak state labor protections, and little to no government oversight. And what I also find is really surprising to me is the fact that, like, a lot of people think being in a union is illegal. Like, I have never seen that before. Like, the amount of workers we talk to, they think unionizing is illegal down south. Like, they think that that is wrong. I know my coworker that I work with, like she grew up down south in Texas, and she was like, I had literally had classes where people literally said like, you know, unions are bad for you. Like if you're part of a union, like it's really bad. Like they're gonna take your money and just all these things. I think that, you know, like you said, I think we're moving away from that, but it is still really, there is a still strong like anti-union sentiment, you know, that workers think that again, like they think unionizing, like that's a bad idea, like that's not good for me, you know, and managers, they still push this anti-union rhetoric of, you know, why would you talk to the union? Like you can come bring your demands to me directly and we'll work with that. And that happens a lot with our workers, like they'll come to USW and they'll say, hey, like, you know, like, we'll help them, and then the manager's like, no, like, we're gonna help you directly, like, you come to us. Granted, they're not gonna do that, right? But again, this is the rhetoric that our workers are hearing constantly from, you know, not only managers, but again, their family members, their friends. It really is something that is shocking to me, especially again from someone who's not from down south.
So yeah, so as someone who's born and raised in the South, still living there, again, that's what I stated earlier, like, we are deeply rooted in systemic racism, systemic classism, and just like systemic paternalistic type things. And so I just go back to like, it took them forever in like Texas to realize they were free, like slaves realized, you know, enslaved people realizing they were free on Juneteenth. Like this was months after, right? And so again, going back to what I stated earlier as well, they that control the message and the narrative, like they win. And that's what we're seeing in the South, right? Like we see that they have been able to control the narrative, and it's a lot of it is based on systemic racism, but then it's like also classism, because they've been able to just basically like bamboozle white workers down there to think that Black and brown workers are taking their jobs and like all the things. And it's like, no, this is like really just a corporation classes war, right? And so it's all about that framing. And so it's very frustrating. But again, like when we're able to have these different organizing campaigns and you're able to bring in, you know, the community and churches with the unions, like you're able to win. And when there's investment, but they've been able to basically kind of cause us to operate in our own silos. And that's how they've been able to win, just like by fracturing us. And that's why I think it's so unique and awesome what they're doing with USSW. And that's why we do what we do with Florida for All, because my organization is comprised of SEIU, Dream Defenders. Those are the Black and brown kids that did staged a sit-in outside of the sheriff's office in Sanford after Trayvon Martin was killed. They staged a sit-in to make sure that George Zimmerman was arrested, right? Also, our organization is comprised of Florida Immigrant Coalition, Faith in Florida, Central Florida Jobs with Justice, and Florida Rising. And so it's unions, community, and faith, right? And that's why we've been able to have wins in different pockets, right? But again, we just have not had the historic investment that we needed. And so when you're able to fracture, when it's so fractured, right? People aren't concerned. People are concerned with how they put a roof over their head, right? Like they're not thinking about, like, they don't understand that a union can really assist you with that, because of that controls the message, controls, like they win, right? That boss message. And so that's what's been happening.
Thank you so much for giving your time. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about the ongoing efforts to increase the coverage of rights, especially for excluded workers, And whether you think there's any hope at all for legislative amendments in coverage.
So yeah, I do. I'm always hopeful. I know it seems like I gave y'all like the bad things that are happening, but I mean, honestly, like this, y'all young, I'm saying it like I'm old. Y'all younger generation, like y'all really give me hope. Y'all aren't taking no for an answer, right? And they're starting to put pressure in certain places on different elected officials and things like that. And so again, when we come together, we win. And so I know that they just had a really bad union busting bill this last legislative session. However, they're coming back to allow some more people to kind of be carved out of that. I hate carve outs, but whatever. A win is a win. And so, and we've been winning on like the local level as far as like union protections and worker protections. It's just the thing with the state. It's the state. But you know, again, I just believe the more we educate people about what's going on and the fact that union rights are human rights, and when unions win rights for workers, like that rising tides lift all boats, right? And so we just have to educate the community about why they need to support unions in these efforts. And what's interesting in Florida, what I've seen, which is great, is when these workers are now going to the bargaining table, like they invite the community to come and to sit in the room and to do petitions. And there's been an all-out attack on higher education in our state, I think we may have heard. And so our graduate students and some of our adjunct professors and our professors in general, like they've been bargaining, but like they have been bringing in the community into those fights. And so we have to continue doing that in order to see wins. And we are seeing some.
You sound like a yeah. I like your answer, yes.
First, I just want to say I've been really looking forward to you both coming here this whole semester, and this was really excellent. So I'm really grateful that you spent time kind of. So thank you. My question is, most of us in this room are probably law students or lawyers, and so I wanted to ask about the role of lawyers in thinking about creative organizing strategies to build economic power and also to build political power and fight against the attacks on democracy that we're seeing and the links between the two.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great question. And I think that's one thing I really like about SEIU. It's like this idea of being an organizing attorney, right? Like that's a part of your role. And I think SEIU does such a good job with it where it's like, you know, I think a lot of times like it's easy for attorneys to be kind of like siloed, but we're always in there with our organizers. We're constantly there, you know, with policy and comms people, and we play like a equal role, which is really nice. And I think for us, again, on the legal side, and I do want to make the note too that like, I always tell organizers, the organizers, like that's the bulk right there, especially for USSW, like that's the bulk. Because like I said before, with part of my job again is dealing with issues when people are retaliated against, doing DLPs, doing all that other stuff in the back end. And again, sometimes that doesn't really help our workers, right? So I want to put a lot of praise towards our organizers and people that really do the work, the groundwork, and work dealing with our workers. But for me though, I think a big thing is, you know, what are the ways in which we're going to put pressure, particularly on governments? Like that's a big thing. Like I said, we did that Title VI complaint against South Carolina OSHA. We have a couple other things that we're planning to do, but I cannot reveal them just yet. In addition, kind of thinking of, again, other ways of how do we put, I want to say pressure on our employers, thinking about like, we've done like, SEIU's done like wage theft campaigns, and so the attorneys work with that. We've done that with fast food. We also have done things around, again, thinking about ways of aggregating like sexual harassment cases that have happened. Unfortunately, sexual harassment is really big for low wage service sector workers. And so really trying to think through of like, you know, what can we do to raise up these issues? Our hope is also to bring, we're hoping to do like a wage theft complaint, bring that to the Department of Labor regarding wage and hour issues that we were seeing, particularly with we're doing our Waffle House campaign, so we're hoping to do that, to bring that soon. And so again, it really just kind of, I think, as a union attorney, it's like kind of thinking outside the box, right? Like you're constantly like thinking like, okay, what is the other way in which I can help move the campaign forward, right? Like, and it's so many different things. It can include like, one big issue with for our workers is with OSHA particularly, is this like a walk around representative rep rule, right? Where, can the union, or if you're not a union, like what if you're like USSW, where we're not a union, we're an organization that helps workers, can we go, during, workplace inspections and be with the workers and point out these issues and things like that. And so, there's a comment period open at OSHA, so we're writing comments there. Yeah, so it's just like, those are just a few of the things that we're constantly thinking about is like, how do we raise these issues? It could also include legislation. So I'm not sure if people are aware of like the Fast Food Council that was created in California. Those are attorneys. Like we're constantly thinking of like, how do we like get things passed with state legislatures? That's particularly hard in the South, right? But like we are doing that in California with fast food. And so those are just a few of the things that come off the top of my head of like what I do at SEIU. It changes from day to day, I will say that, but it's constantly thinking of like, what can we do to agitate change?
Thank y'all both for being here. This has been amazing. Rep Nixon, I'm actually from Florida, from Miami. I was an organizer there, just local organization, but I worked a lot with New Florida
What's the name of
majority.
it?
H Miami.
Oh, I talked to Rachel the other day.
Very cool. Yeah, I worked a lot with them. I was a dream defender in my own time, so I appreciate the plug there. You talked a lot about how important it is for the labor movement in the South, given the challenges to work with civil society organizations that are doing grassroots organizing of different communities. I'm curious for you, how do you think about your role now as an elected official in that dynamic? I'm curious for the USSW, how do y'all think about that? Is it important? How important is it? And kind of like maybe some examples of times you've seen it be effective or particularly creative.
Yeah, for sure. So let me address that question and then I'll get to you. So one of the things that I would ask you all to do is don't just go for the bright, shiny object that is going to like help you pay down your student loans after college. Come work for social justice organizations. Come work at state caucuses to like help us, draft legislation. Also help us hand L's to fascist governors when you're, when you can like sue the state and that type of thing. So we need y'all, right? And in regards to your question, my brother in the fight in Florida, like elected officials aren't all that smart like me. We need, so I use my platform as an elected official to basically push the progressive bills and policies that the people want, right? It's really important for us to educate these elected officials. They don't know what they're like. They don't know. The majority of the bills that come down the pipeline are from lobbyists or think tanks and that type of stuff. And like, it could be the same way for good from progressive organizations and coalitions and community members, right? I just, like, I ain't gonna lie, and I tell them I plagiarize all their talking points to these groups, Dream Defenders and Florida Watch and all these groups, to really educate the community and also to combat just like the bad, trashy bills that are coming out of Florida, right? And so it's really important for that relationship to be tight. It's really important for these organizations to hold us accountable, because and I have to continually remind people elected officials work for the people. We don't work for, we're not supposed to work for corporations, we're supposed to work for people. Like, there is real power in the people. And so what's interesting with Florida for All, and I know some of my colleagues are really pissed off with me right now, on my side and the other side, because we have these delegation meetings that we do every year within our counties, where all the state legislators in the county come together and they listen to the community members in their area, or the community members come forward from having worked with like the council, the city council, or the county commissioners to put forth bills, J bills, they call them. And so local bills. And so in my role as executive director, we have basically packed out a lot of those delegation meetings, so that instead of hearing from, nothing against United Way, but they're corporate, right? Like, instead of hearing from those organizations and things like that, you are now hearing from these really grassroots organizations about like the fact that y'all have not been addressing this 8,000 educator shortage, right? But you've been offering $3 billion bailouts to the insurance company and have not addressed the rising property insurance crisis. And so like, I missed the delegation meeting today in Jacksonville, but like, it's 93 people that they had to listen to, 50 of which I helped organize to that meeting, right? Like, they had to shut down the comments in Pinellas County, St. Pete area, because we had 73 folks over there. And like, that's the role we can play. Oftentimes, Tallahassee is so far removed and far away from everything in the state. And so that's the role like these groups can play, by making sure that the voice of the people is actually heard. Therefore, legislation to address the needs of the people actually gets put on the books.
I am so sorry to say that we are out of time, but please join me in thanking both of our panelists for this really